Hello everyone. For my week 2 discussion video post, I'm going to be describing for you an activity that I do in some of my classes and that I've also used for research purposes to study stigma related to serious mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, which can frequently involve the experience of hearing voices. The learning activity is called the Hearing Voices That Are Distressing workshop. It was created by Dr. Patricia Deegan, who is also a person who experiences voice hearing. A little bit about language here. In Canada and some parts of Europe, the preference is not to use the term auditory hallucinations, but instead to use the phrase people who hear voices. And not all voice hearing is distressing. Some voice hearing is comforting, and so on. So Dr. Deegan and others like her prefer to use the terminology voice hearing or people who hear voices. So I'll be using that language here today. So basically, the activity, which was designed originally to help train people like first responders, people who work in the justice system, people who work in the medical system, to teach them how to have more deep understanding and empathy and compassion for people who hear voices. And it's been deployed all over the place for probably the last 25 years for that purpose. Of training those populations. I modified it slightly so that it would fit a time frame that was more appropriate for a college classroom. So I've modified it to fit a 70-minute kind of time frame, which is typical of Tuesday, Thursday classes at our university. The workshop involves putting people who are participating in the shoes, basically, of people who hear voices by having them listen to an audio file that was created by people who actually experience voices. So it's an immersive replication of audio that feels like, it sounds like the experiences of people who hear voices. The activity, just to give you a more complete description of it, the activity involves a set of steps where you begin the training by using a grounding video that was produced by Dr. Deegan to explain the training, to explain its purpose, and the philosophy behind it. Then you prepare students for the simulation experience. What students are given when I do the workshop, I wrote a grant and got, I don't know if anyone remembers these, there were iPod Nanos. They're tiny, like 1" by 1" MP3 players. And I wrote the grant so I could get 30 of those, so I could do this as a class activity, and then loaded the audio file produced by Dr. Deegan onto those individual iPod Nanos. Each iPod comes with a set of earbuds. So they basically, you prep them to put in the earbuds, and when they are ready to begin the simulation, they hit play, and they're told, don't change the volume, because people who hear voices in real life don't get to do that. They're told not to pause or remove one headphone because, again, people who hear voices in real life don't get that option. They're also instructed not to talk to each other about what they're hearing. So it's not intended to be, hey, wow, did you hear that? And then have a conversation about it. People who actually hear voices don't tend to, it's described by Dr. Deegan as a solitary activity, hearing voices. The stigma tends to be so great that people who do hear voices tend not to discuss it with others, particularly not strangers around them. So they're instructed not to do that. They're asked to do a number of activities. And again, I had to modify this somewhat in some versions of the workshop. People engage in a mini job interview. They attempt to fill out a job application, and then they're asked questions by a mock interviewer. In some cases, they're asked, when it's done with police officers, for example, they're asked to do a traffic report, to fill out a traffic report. So it's highly modifiable and customizable for people to do. So we chose activities that could fit within our time frame, but also be relevant to the college experience. So we gave them a number puzzle that involved some not overly challenging math, but challenging enough math to take some time. We had them work with a mock quote-unquote psychologist to do a mental status exam. So they're asked to respond to a set of questions while the audio is playing in their earbuds. We send them out to our library building, and they're asked to do something they don't usually have to do anymore, given technology. Usually you don't go to a library to ask a question like what we asked them to do, and we did that on purpose. We asked them to go to the library and ask for assistance in identifying the library code, the call number for a particular book. So they have to interact with the librarian. They have to work with that person to explain what they want. And sometimes the library staff, if they're students, they're like, what's a call number? So the person has to explain what it is that they really want. And then finally, human bingo, which basically you take this bingo card that has, common experiences, and you move through the class to identify other people who can fill your bingo card up. Now, as I mentioned, this activity involves putting participants in the role of someone who hears voices or auditory hallucinations while they're doing tasks. And what many people who don't have a voice hearing experience don't get is that it's a lot of cognitive load. So the tasks are designed to also have cognitive load. The activity that when people complete it, for purposes of this discussion post, and I know I'm going over on time, but I feel this is a very constructivist activity. The definition that Brown and Green give is basically that people construe their own environments. They come up with their own meaning. They develop their own understandings. And social psychology, which is my discipline, is very grounded in that work. So the learner is an agent of discovery. The learner is actively engaged in pulling threads together and making sense of them based on what they're currently experiencing. So while this activity has behavioral and connectivist elements as well, I see it mostly as a constructivist type activity. Now, how does this fit that learning theory? The workshop is immersive. It puts participants into the shoes of people with that lived experience of voice hearing, and they're asked to complete everyday tasks that students often have to engage in. Many students report that they were surprised by the cognitive load of just having voices on in the background. Many of them thought, well, I often have music on in the background. I can ignore that. Well, the voice hearing is very different than having background music that you're familiar with and that you can easily kind of slide off to a cognitive spot beside you and basically ignore. For this experience, they realize first, that they can't do that they find that really difficult to do. When done with first responders, the experience typically yields a shift in perception where their understanding of the people they encounter in their work who are experiencing these serious mental illnesses that involve psychosis and voice hearing, they shift from being irritated by them, frustrated with them, to feeling much greater compassion and concern, slowing down their need to get rapid fire answers to questions in a quick way. One judge noted that he decided after the immersive experience he needed to slow down. He needed to ask questions and wait several seconds for the person who's hearing voices to make sense of the question, and then be able to shift the cognitive load around so that they could actually answer it in reasonable time. My students have reported a similar shift in perception of the reality of interacting with other people when having this kind of symptomology. One of my students, for instance, noted that he had encounters with people he previously saw as, quote, dangerous, crazy people, unquote, to seeing these as individuals who are struggling with a difficult cognitive demand, a different emotional experience, and so his perspective had shifted to curiosity and compassion. Now, what could I do differently to make it fit the theory better? I could make more explicit in the prep and debriefing elements the constructivist point of view, that there is an intention to shift your perspective. There is an intention to reshape how you're viewing yourself and how you're viewing people who have different experiences. Asking those kinds of follow-up questions directly that are related to the constructivist point of view, things about social engagement and social negotiation, ownership of the learning experience, and self-awareness, I think that could be beneficial for participants. Now, obviously, I drifted into lecture mode a bit. Apologies for going over time, but hopefully that was useful for you.